The Afghan sun beat mercilessly over the jagged ridges, turning the rocky terrain into a glittering, oppressive expanse. Dust swirled in the dry wind, coating every surface with a fine red layer that scratched at exposed skin. From a distance, the mountains appeared almost serene, their rugged outlines forming a backdrop to the deadly game unfolding below. For the soldiers of the 3rd Recon Battalion, serenity was a rare luxury. Every hour was measured by the unpredictability of the terrain, the movement of insurgents, and the unpredictable temperament of the Afghan wind. Private Lucas Kane trudged along the narrow ridge, his rifle slung over his shoulder. He was young, 22 years old, fresh out of training, and freshly deployed. His boots scuffed over gravel and loose stones as he followed Sergeant Tom Baer, Hensley, the squad's seasoned leader. Lucas's uniform was still crisp, the insignia freshly ironed, the rifle barrel polished to a reflective gleam. To the eyes of his fellow soldiers, he looked like a man who had walked straight from the training fields of Fort Benning into the high-altitude desert, untested and untried. Baer glanced over his shoulder, assessing Lucas with a veteran's scrutiny. "You sure you can handle this, rookie?" he asked, his gravelly voice carrying over the wind. It wasn't meant as insult. It was a test, a challenge. Baer had seen too many inexperienced snipers bite off more than they could chew, only to fall short when the stakes were highest. Lucas nodded, gripping his rifle tighter, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing against his chest. "Yes, Sergeant," he replied, voice steady despite the nervous flutter in his stomach. The squad had been deployed to this remote outpost after reports of insurgent activity near the valley below. Intelligence suggested a convoy of armed insurgents was moving through the area, heavy weaponry, explosives, and a high chance of casualties for any patrol that dared to intercept. The mission was straightforward in objective, but impossible in execution. Prevent the convoy from reaching populated regions while staying unseen and unengaged unless absolutely necessary. It was a delicate balance of precision and patience, the kind of work that separated rookies from veterans. Lucas took a deep breath, inhaling the dusty air, tinged with the faint aroma of diesel from armored vehicles stationed behind their ridge. He recalled his childhood in Montana, growing up in the shadow of towering pines and snow-capped mountains. His grandfather, a retired Marine sniper, had taught him to shoot, to measure wind and distance, to respect the weapon in his hands. Those days felt a world away, memories of serene mornings with sun glinting off dewy grass, compared to the harsh reality of an Afghan battlefield. Yet every lesson his grandfather had imparted now mattered more than ever. The squad found a position near a cluster of boulders, providing minimal cover but excellent visibility over the valley below. Lucas laid down his rifle, resting it on a small bipod, and began scanning the landscape through the scope. The enemy was visible as tiny silhouettes against the sprawling desert floor, their movements deliberate and organized. Calculating distance, wind, and trajectory, Lucas felt a thrill surge through him, a combination of fear, anticipation, and the familiar rush of focus that had accompanied him since his first hunting trips. Baer crouched beside him, watching Lucas with a mixture of suspicion and hope. "Remember," he said, "we're counting on you to spot first, shoot second. Don't get ahead of yourself. And don't miss." He chuckled under his breath, a rare moment of levity in the tension-filled morning. Lucas smiled faintly, though the weight of the task pressed down harder than any mountain wind. He adjusted the scope, crosshairs steady on the convoy, feeling the power of the rifle in his hands, the cool metal vibrating slightly with anticipation. Hours passed in tense silence. The convoy moved slowly, as if aware of the unseen eyes tracking them from above. Lucas's mind raced, calculating angles, wind direction, and the Coriolis effect, every factor that could alter the path of a bullet over the extraordinary distance he would have to fire. His fingers tightened around the trigger, imagining the shot in precise increments. Breathe in, settle, exhale, squeeze. In his head, he could already see the bullet traveling, seeing its trajectory arc gracefully across the valley. It was almost poetic and terrifying in equal measure. The squad's chatter was minimal, broken only by the occasional crunch of gravel under boots or the distant rumble of insurgent vehicles. Lucas's fellow soldiers watched him with curiosity. Some doubted he could perform under pressure. Others quietly hoped he would prove them wrong. For Lucas, it wasn't about proving anyone right or wrong. It was about staying alive, keeping his squad safe, and honoring the lessons of his grandfather, who had drilled into him the importance of patience, discipline, and calm under pressure. Finally, the insurgent convoy stopped near a ridge, unaware of the danger lurking above. Lucas's heart thumped against his rib cage. The shot would be unprecedented over 4 kilometers away, one of the longest distances a sniper from their unit had ever attempted. He exhaled slowly, centering his mind, blocking out the voices, the dust, and the sun. He reminded himself, a sniper's true power was focus. Every calculation mattered. Every second counted. Bear leaned closer, whispering, "You ready, Kane?" Lucas nodded, eyes fixed through the scope. "Ready, Sergeant." Time seemed to stretch and contract, moments suspended in the hot, dry air. Lucas adjusted the scope one last time, accounted for the wind, elevation, and gravity, and allowed himself a fleeting thought. This is it. Either it works or it doesn't. He tightened his grip, exhaled, and placed his finger gently on the trigger. The weight of the rifle pressed into his shoulder, steady and reassuring. This was more than a shot. It was a test of everything he had learned, every hour of preparation, every lesson in patience, precision, and mental fortitude. He would not allow inexperience to betray him. The squad watched, hearts collectively holding, the world reduced to the thin crosshairs resting over the distant convoy. And in that suspended moment, as dust swirled around him, and the mountains seemed to hold their breath, Lucas Kane, a rookie, untested, unknown, prepared to attempt a shot that would change everything. The convoy moved like a sluggish ribbon across the valley floor, each vehicle a tiny silhouette against the endless expanse of dust and rock. Lucas Kane's eyes traced every motion through the scope of his Barrett MRAD, calculating angles, wind, drift, and the staggering distance, 4,200 meters, between him and the target. It was a distance no rookie had ever attempted in the unit. Even Bear, a hardened veteran with 12 years of sniper experience, had to admit, inwardly, that the shot was near impossible. Lucas felt a rush of adrenaline and a quiet fear, a paradoxical mixture that made his senses sharper than ever. The wind picked up, swirling across the ridge in erratic gusts. Dust lifted into tiny tornadoes, momentarily obscuring the convoy, and Lucas adjusted his calculations, each number in his mind a lifeline. The rifle rested firmly against his shoulder, its cold metal a reassuring anchor. He exhaled slowly, steadying his heartbeat. The world seemed to contract, focusing on the distant convoy, the target, the scope, the wind. Every other sound, every other movement, faded into insignificance. Bear crouched beside him, the seasoned veteran's eyes narrowing through his own binoculars. "Kane," he muttered, voice low, "remember, one shot. Don't rush it. Calculate, breathe, wait for the perfect moment." His words weren't just instruction. They were a lifeline, a reminder that precision could mean the difference between life and death. Lucas nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He had spent countless hours in Montana, practicing marksmanship on deer and elk, but this was no hunting trip. This was war. The convoy had paused, seemingly unaware of the pair of eyes fixed upon them from the heights. Lucas's finger hovered over the trigger, muscles taut with anticipation. He adjusted the scope once more, compensating for wind drift, and the slight arc gravity would impose over 4 kilometers. The calculations he had practiced endlessly in his mind clicked into place. This was the moment he had trained for, the culmination of every lesson, every hour of patient preparation. The first vehicle, an armed pickup, crested a small ridge. Lucas's breath slowed, each inhale measured, deliberate. The crosshairs settled on the target, and he could feel the slight vibration of the rifle as his pulse pulsed through his hands. Time seemed to stretch, each second an eternity. The squad behind him was silent, their eyes wide, watching him with a mixture of disbelief and anticipation. The youngest among them, a corporal named Rios, whispered under his breath, "He's gonna do it." Lucas exhaled slowly, just as Bear had instructed. He aligned the shot, accounting for the slight angle of the valley, the shifting wind, and the minute rotation of the earth beneath him, a factor many snipers called Coriolis effect. His grandfather's lessons echoed in his mind. Every detail matters, Lucas. Patience and precision, or nothing at all. The thought steadied him. His finger tightened gently on the trigger, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The shot rang out, muffled only slightly by the distance and the rifle's suppressor. Lucas watched the crosshairs, tracking the bullet's trajectory in his mind as it vanished into the hazy distance. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, like the world had exhaled with relief and shock simultaneously, a distant explosion rocked the valley. The first pickup erupted into flames, sending a plume of smoke spiraling into the sky. The insurgents froze, chaos breaking out across their ranks. The squad erupted in disbelief. Bear's jaw dropped, and even the most seasoned soldiers exchanged stunned glances. "Holy hell," Rios muttered, voice barely audible over the wind. Lucas lowered the rifle slowly, his hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the realization of what he had just accomplished. The impossible had become reality. He had neutralized the threat from over 4 kilometers away, a feat no one in the unit had believed possible for a rookie. But Lucas didn't celebrate. The reality of the shot weighed heavily on him. He had taken lives, changed the course of a mission, and possibly altered the battlefield for the next several days. The gravity of the act pressed down on him, heavier than the rifle in his hands. Bear placed a hand on his shoulder, a rare gesture of reassurance. "That was something else," he said, voice tinged with awe. "You've got guts, Kane, and skill. Don't let it get to your head." Even as the squad processed the magnitude of the event, Lucas's mind remained focused, scanning the valley for further threats. The convoy was now in disarray, insurgents scrambling, attempting to regroup and return fire. The other vehicles halted, engines idling, smoke curling into the sky. Lucas's spotter, a seasoned sniper named Reyes, called out coordinates for potential secondary targets, though Lucas knew he would have to wait. One shot at a time, patience, precision, survival. The radio crackled with activity. Command was tracking the convoy via drone feeds and satellite imagery. Reports came in, voices tinged with disbelief. Confirmed. Target neutralized at 4,200 meters. Unbelievable. Lucas listened quietly, the weight of their words pressing against him. Fame was not his concern, though he knew it would follow. Right now, the mission and the safety of his squad was all that mattered. As the smoke from the explosion cleared, Lucas allowed himself a brief exhale. He had proven something, not just to the squad, but to himself. Inexperience did not equate to failure. Focus, training, and courage could transcend years of doubt. Bear nodded at him again, eyes meeting his with a silent acknowledgement of respect. "You did it," he said simply. Lucas gave a faint nod, understanding that in this world, success was measured not by applause, but by survival, precision, and the trust of the men beside him. The convoy's remaining vehicles scattered, retreating towards safer ground. Lucas and the squad remained in position, monitoring movements and ready for any further threats. But the first impossible shot had been made, etched into memory like a photograph. Every soldier present knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, something that would be retold in barracks, debriefings, and perhaps even military history. Lucas himself remained quiet, the weight of what he had done pressing heavily on his shoulders. That night, as the outpost settled into a tense calm, Lucas lay awake, staring at the stars above the jagged peaks. He thought about the shot, the lives altered, and the responsibility he now carried. It was more than skill. It was a burden. Yet, for the first time since arriving, he felt a quiet confidence. He belonged here. He had proven himself. And the world, unseen and distant as it was, had just witnessed the mark of a rookie sniper who dared to attempt the impossible. The dust settled slowly over the valley, curling around the jagged rocks like ghostly fingers. For a moment, time seemed suspended. The insurgent convoy, once a moving threat, now lay scattered and destroyed, smoldering under the harsh Afghan sun. Lucas Kane lowered his Barrett MRAD slowly, muscles tense from the effort of holding still for what had felt like hours. His chest heaved slightly, not from exertion, but from the overwhelming reality of what he had just accomplished. A shot that no one thought possible, and yet the valley itself bore witness to it. The squad remained frozen in place, staring at Lucas with a mix of awe, disbelief, and reverence. Even Bear, the stoic veteran who had seen every conceivable form of battlefield chaos, could only manage a low, "Holy hell." His voice was a mixture of admiration and astonishment, the kind that rarely surfaced from someone who had survived 12 years of combat deployments. Other soldiers whispered to one another, their voices hushed, almost as if speaking louder would somehow shatter the miracle they had just witnessed. Lucas's hands trembled slightly as he cleaned his sweat-streaked face with the back of his sleeve. He didn't feel triumph. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him with a suffocating intensity. That single bullet had altered lives, destroyed plans, and eliminated a threat, but it was more than a tactical victory. It was a moral burden, a silent whisper that reminded him that life and death were just separated by the pull of a trigger. He could hear Bear's words echoing in his mind. Every bullet tells a story. The squad moved cautiously now, adjusting their positions as they watched the remaining insurgents flee. No one spoke, but their eyes continually flicked to Lucas. They were measuring him, reassessing the rookie they had doubted just hours earlier. The younger soldiers, like Corporal Rios, were visibly shaken, awestruck by the display of skill. Did he really just do that? Rios whispered under his breath. Another soldier muttered, from that distance. Impossible. Even the drones hovering above seemed to hesitate, their mechanical eyes capturing footage of a shot that would soon make its way into military legend. Bear crouched beside Lucas, a hand lightly resting on the young sniper's shoulder. You know this isn't just luck, right? He said quietly. Lucas looked at him, eyes wide, unsure if he believed it himself. I don't know, he admitted softly, voice tinged with disbelief. The reality of the shot, the physics, the wind, the arc over 4,200 meters felt surreal. In training, he had calculated such distances, practiced the math endlessly, but seeing it manifest in real combat was another matter entirely. The target, the smoke, the silence, it all felt like a dream he couldn't wake from. The squad began moving methodically, checking for secondary threats while keeping Lucas protected. The radio crackled to life, and voices from command filtered through, tinged with astonishment. Confirmed kill at 4,200 meters. Excellent marksmanship, Kane, a voice reported. Lucas barely registered the praise. Fame, accolades, media attention, these were distant concerns. Right now, all that mattered was survival, precision, and keeping the squad safe. He adjusted his scope once more, scanning for any movement that might indicate insurgents attempting to regroup. As the adrenaline began to fade, Lucas felt a sudden wave of exhaustion wash over him. His mind replayed the shot repeatedly, almost in slow motion. The alignment, the calculated windage, the release of the trigger, and the explosion as the vehicle erupted. It was a haunting sequence, one that felt simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. Even in the relief, he could not ignore the permanence of the act. A life had been taken, and while it was a threat neutralized, it was also irrevocable. Bear noticed Lucas's tense expression and crouched closer. "You okay?" he asked. Lucas nodded, but the nod was more of acknowledgement than reassurance. "I just can't stop thinking about it," Lucas admitted. Bear's face softened. "You're not supposed to. That's the weight we carry. Every sniper, every soldier, it doesn't go away. It's part of the job. You did what you were trained to do. You saved lives." The words were meant to comfort, but Lucas felt the burden grow heavier. Saving lives often came at the cost of taking them, and the line between hero and killer was perilously thin. As the squad continued observing the valley, Lucas noticed a faint shimmer in the heat waves rising off the desert floor. He scanned the horizon meticulously. The remaining insurgents had scattered into the rocky outcrops, attempting to regroup. Lucas's mind raced with calculations. Should he fire again? Was it safe? Each thought was weighed with caution. A second shot from that distance would be exponentially more difficult, and every misstep could cost lives. The squad's trust in him depended not only on his skill, but also on his judgment. Nightfall approached, casting long shadows across the valley. The outpost settled into a tense calm, the echoes of the day lingering in the air. Lucas sat on the ridge, rifle resting beside him, watching the fading light. The world seemed both immense and fragile, every detail of the landscape etched into his memory. He replayed the shot over and over, not out of pride, but from the haunting realization of what it meant. This was no longer a test. It was a turning point. Lucas Kane had crossed the threshold from rookie to a soldier whose name would be remembered. The squad gathered around a small campfire later that evening, sharing quiet conversation and a meal of ration packs. Their voices were subdued, still processing what had just occurred. They spoke not of glory, but of survival, strategy, and the incredible precision of Lucas's shot. Even the older veterans found themselves marveling at the skill of the young sniper, recognizing that sometimes extraordinary ability could appear in the most unexpected places. Lucas sat apart, staring into the flames, lost in thought. He remembered his grandfather's advice. A real sniper doesn't just hit the target. He respects it, understands it, and accepts the responsibility of what comes after. The words felt heavier now than ever. Fame and accolades were meaningless compared to the gravity of the act itself. Lucas understood that he had entered a world where every decision carried weight, where every pull of the trigger could alter the course of history, however small or large. As the fire crackled and the stars emerged over the rugged peaks, Lucas finally allowed himself a deep breath. He had survived his first true test, and the impossible had become reality. But he knew that this was only the beginning. In the days ahead, missions would become more complex, threats more unpredictable, and the psychological burden heavier. Yet for the first time, Lucas Kane felt the quiet certainty of a soldier who had faced the impossible and survived. He was no longer merely a rookie. He was a sniper, tested by fire, defined by precision, and carrying the weight of a moment that would never be forgotten. The next morning dawned with the same harsh sun that had marked Lucas Kane's first day on the ridge, but nothing about it felt ordinary. The outpost buzzed with activity. Radios crackled with reports, officers checked logs, and a quiet, almost reverent energy filled the air. The squad moved methodically, eyes occasionally glancing toward Lucas, who carried himself with a mixture of pride, shock, and an unfamiliar heaviness. The shot had secured their mission's success, yet Lucas felt no exhilaration, no victory. Instead, an invisible weight pressed down on him, the weight of knowing that a single action, one careful pull of the trigger, had taken life. Lucas sat on a rock near the edge of the ridge, the desert wind brushing against his face, trying to settle his racing thoughts. The memory of the bullet's trajectory, the explosion, and the chaos that followed, played on an endless loop in his mind. He had imagined countless scenarios during training, visualized targets and distances, accounted for every variable in meticulous detail. But nothing in Montana, nothing in the controlled safety of a firing range, could have prepared him for the reality of destroying a life from over 4 kilometers away. Bear approached quietly, the veteran's presence grounding Lucas in the moment. "You all right, Kane?" Bear asked, crouching beside him. Lucas nodded, though the nod was slow, hesitant. He wasn't certain he was. "It's a lot," he admitted softly. Bear's expression softened. "It always is," he said. "Every sniper carries it. Every soldier. You can't escape it. But you learn to carry it, not let it crush you." The words were simple, but carried the weight of someone who had seen countless lives altered in a single moment of decision. The squad gathered for a briefing with the commanding officer. Lucas listened silently as the mission was dissected, praised for precision, judgment, and execution. The words of commendation were meant to instill pride, but Lucas felt disconnected. To him, the shot was not a triumph, it was a haunting reminder of mortality. The insurgent was gone, yes, but the act remained. He thought of the lives the convoy might have claimed if left unchecked, but the image of the man who had been struck at such distance lingered vividly. Lucas realized that heroism came with a price, an unrelenting conscience. Later, Lucas retreated to a quiet corner of the outpost. He cleaned his rifle, each motion mechanical, repetitive, almost ritualistic. The metallic smell of the weapon, the cool touch of the barrel, these were constants he could rely on, anchors in a world that felt suddenly unpredictable. He reflected on his grandfather's teachings. A sniper's true skill is knowing when to shoot, and the courage to live with the consequences. The words reverberated within him, an echo that was now more profound than ever. Lucas had fired. Now he had to live with the weight of the shot. The younger soldiers were abuzz with quiet speculation. Corporal Rios approached Lucas, hesitant but eager. I can't believe you did it," he said. "Over 4 kilometers. And you hit him first shot." Lucas gave a faint, distracted nod, not meeting the corporal's eyes. He was aware of the awe surrounding him, but felt removed from it. Praise was hollow in comparison to the responsibility he now carried. He understood something essential, the difference between myth and man. Others saw a legend. He saw a boy who had been forced to grow up in a single moment. Even Bear noticed the change in Lucas. That evening, he pulled the rookie aside, away from the prying eyes of the squad. "You look haunted," he said bluntly. Lucas did not argue. He admitted, "I keep replaying it. The shot, the explosion. Everything." Bear nodded, understanding. "That's normal. That means you're human. That means you respect what you do. But you can't let it paralyze you. You survived. You protected the squad. You've earned their trust. And now you need to earn yours." Lucas took in the words, feeling a small measure of comfort, though the heaviness in his chest remained. Later that night, Lucas lay awake beneath the sparse roof of the outpost tent, the desert wind whistling through the fabric. He could hear the soft breathing of the squad around him, each man sleeping lightly, wary of the next threat. Lucas's mind wandered back to Montana, to mornings spent with his grandfather teaching patience and precision. How simple it had seemed, then how pure. Here, in the harsh desert, lessons had taken on new dimensions, sharper edges. He realized that every sniper carries invisible scars, invisible burdens, heavier than the heaviest weapon. The fame of the shot was beginning to ripple beyond the outpost. Command was already discussing debriefings, reports, and the possibility of media coverage. Lucas didn't seek recognition, didn't want it. The thought of interviews and headlines made his stomach churn. He knew the shot would make him a hero in the eyes of many, but he also knew the reality behind the label. A hero was not just someone who succeeded. It was someone who endured, someone who carried the aftermath quietly, without fanfare. Lucas realized he was stepping into that role, whether he wanted it or not. As the days passed, Lucas continued to train, refine, and observe. He spent hours recalculating distances, studying wind patterns, and reviewing maps of the valley. But his mind was never truly at rest. The shot lingered, a constant reminder of the duality of skill and consequence. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw the distant valley, the insurgent convoy, and the moment the bullet connected. It was a memory etched permanently into his consciousness, both proof of ability and a haunting record of mortality. Bear remained a steady presence, guiding Lucas through the uncharted territory of sudden fame and responsibility. "You're not just Kane the rookie anymore," Bear said one evening as they cleaned rifles together. "You're Kane the sniper. And a sniper's work is never over. Every shot is a choice. Every choice has weight. Remember that." Lucas nodded, finally understanding. The weight of a sniper was not measured in distance or skill. It was measured in conscience, in the ability to live with what one has done. By the end of the week, Lucas had earned the respect of his squad, though the internal struggle remained. He ate, trained, and patrolled with them. Yet in moments of solitude, the weight pressed heavily. The desert no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a mirror, reflecting both his triumph and the cost that came with it. Lucas Kane had succeeded in the impossible, but success carried a burden invisible to all but him. He realized, with quiet clarity, that his journey had only just begun. That night, Lucas stood on the ridge, gazing across the valley where the convoy had fallen. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the rocky landscape. He felt the desert wind against his face and allowed himself a moment of reflection. This was the world he had chosen, the path of precision, responsibility, and quiet courage. The shot had changed everything, not only for the mission, but for Lucas himself. The burden of success was heavy, but it was his to carry, and he would carry it with the discipline, skill, and humility of a sniper who had faced the impossible and survived. The desert morning was harsh and unrelenting, the sun carving long shadows over the rocky outpost. Yet inside the walls of the base, the atmosphere was anything but normal. Lucas Kane had become a legend overnight. The impossible shot, the 4,200-meter kill, was being discussed in hushed tones by soldiers, whispered across radio channels, and even picked up by command networks. For Lucas, the attention was overwhelming. He had expected nothing, sought nothing. But now, he found himself under the scrutiny of the entire battalion, his every action measured against the myth of the shot. News traveled fast. Within hours, the footage from drones and satellite imagery had been compiled and sent to higher command. Officers visited the outpost, praising the precision and courage of the young sniper. "Remarkable marksmanship," they said, shaking his hand firmly. Lucas nodded politely, though internally he felt detached. He had done what any soldier is trained to do: neutralize threats and protect his squad. Yet, the weight of the act the life it ended, the responsibility it carried, made him feel unmoored from the praise. He was not a hero in his mind. He was merely a soldier who had survived a moment of impossibility. The squad, meanwhile, had a mixed reaction. Some were awed, whispering in admiration and curiosity. "Did you see that shot?" 4 kilometers. "First attempt," murmured Rios. Others were quieter, a shadow of tension lurking in their glances. Not envy, exactly, but the subtle reminder that one mistake, one misjudgment, could cost lives even for the most skilled sniper. Bear noticed the unspoken dynamics and kept a careful watch. He understood the delicate balance fame could bring, how it could bolster confidence or breed resentment. Lucas, he knew, needed guidance to navigate it. The Rook's fame reached beyond the outpost. Messages came from higher-ups. Commendations, requests for interviews, even invitations to brief military audiences. "You're an inspiration," one officer had said, eyes bright with admiration. Lucas nodded, smiling faintly, but the inside of him churned. He had not fired for recognition. He had fired to save lives, and now he was being lauded as a hero in a story that glossed over the consequences. To him, fame was a fragile veneer over a burden that would never leave him. During patrols that followed, Lucas found himself under the watchful gaze of his squad in new ways. Where once he had been the rookie, now he was the standard-bearer. Every decision he made, every shot he lined up, was analyzed and speculated upon. He felt the pressure keenly. In one moment of hesitation during a routine exercise, Rios nearly fell into a hidden trench. The near accident startled Lucas, a reminder that even legends could make mistakes. Bear approached afterward, serious. "Confidence is good," he said, "but it can't blind you. Don't let fame make you forget what's at stake." The media attention escalated in ways Lucas had not anticipated. High command considered releasing his story, turning him into a symbol of precision and bravery. The thought of interviews and reports made his stomach twist. Lucas spent hours thinking about the shot, the men in the convoy, and the line between duty and morality. His hands itched for the rifle, a reminder that skill alone could not define him. He needed to maintain focus, precision, and discipline. Fame could not replace the calculation, patience, or responsibility that made a sniper truly effective. That evening, Lucas sat apart from the squad, cleaning his rifle in the fading sunlight. The metal was cold against his palms, grounding him. The sounds of the outpost, the hum of vehicles, the distant chatter, the desert wind surrounded him, but did not distract. Lucas focused on the rifle, on the fundamentals, on the repetitive motions that reminded him of control and skill. It was a meditation of sorts, a way to process the attention and internal turbulence without succumbing to distraction. Here he could breathe. Here he could be the sniper, not the legend. Bear joined him quietly, settling beside him on the rocks. "They'll talk about this for weeks," he said, nodding toward the outpost. "Every soldier wants to hear about the rookie who made the impossible shot. But you need to stay focused. Fame is fleeting. Skill, discipline, and judgment, those are forever." Lucas nodded, absorbing the advice. He understood that the spotlight was temporary, a fragile construct. What mattered, in the long run, was the ability to act decisively when the next mission came, and to live with the consequences, good or bad. The tension within the squad began to show in small ways. Some soldiers pulled back, unsure whether to treat Lucas as a peer or an untouchable figure. Others tried to seek guidance, testing his patience. Lucas found himself in a delicate balancing act, asserting authority when necessary, yet remaining grounded and humble. Every decision was measured, every command deliberate. Fame could not compromise precision, not when lives depended on split-second judgment and calm under fire. He felt the weight of expectation growing heavier with each passing day. By the end of the week, the reality of the outpost's mission reasserted itself. New intel suggested insurgent activity nearby. Lucas and the squad prepared for movement. Weaponry checked, supplies verified. The fame, the interviews, the accolades, they mattered less now. Focus, discipline, teamwork, that was all that mattered. Lucas adjusted his scope one last time before the patrol, feeling the familiar weight of the rifle against his shoulder. Here, in the harsh Afghan terrain, skill spoke louder than legend. He had learned that the hardest battles were not against the enemy, but against doubt, expectation, and the burdens fame could place upon even the most capable soldier. As the squad moved out across the ridge, Lucas felt a quiet determination settle over him. He was no longer merely a rookie who had performed the impossible. He was a sniper whose actions would define not only the mission but himself. The desert wind whispered across the rocky terrain, carrying with it dust, sand, and the silent acknowledgement of what had transpired. Lucas knew that fame would fade, but the responsibility, the discipline, and the lessons of the shot would remain forever. He was prepared for what lay ahead, whatever the cost. The valley stretched below the ridge like a vast, unending expanse of rock, sand, and scattered shrubs, deceptively peaceful under the harsh Afghan sun. Months had passed since Lucas Kane's legendary shot. The memory of it lingered in the squad's minds, whispered in quiet moments, and recounted in briefings as a testament to skill, patience, and precision. But glory and legend did not equate to safety. Intel confirmed insurgent regrouping in the valley, more organized, more cautious, and eager for revenge. The mission was clear: intercept, neutralize, and survive. Yet even the veteran soldiers knew returning was a test in itself. Lucas checked his rifle meticulously, his fingers running over the polished metal, ensuring the scope, barrel, and trigger were flawless. The Barrett MRAD felt heavier now, weighted not by physical mass, but by responsibility. He had become the squad's lifeline, the sentinel whose precision and judgment could mean the difference between life and death. Bear watched silently, observing Lucas as he adjusted his gear. The rookie had grown into a sniper whose calm under pressure now inspired, rather than intimidated, the squad. Yet Bear knew the true test lay ahead. The squad descended the narrow ridge paths toward the valley floor, moving with practiced stealth. Each step was measured, calculated, every shadow and rock a potential threat. Dust rose around their boots, carried by the wind, blending with the distant hum of engines far below. The insurgents had likely observed the ridge, scanning for any sign of movement. Lucas kept his scope trained ahead, spotting subtle shifts in terrain, glimmers of camouflage, and the faint outlines of hidden ambush points. His mind worked like a machine, computing distances, predicting movement, and preparing for contingencies. Suddenly, a sharp crack split the air. Bullets pinged against rocks. Sand kicked into the air as rounds struck the ground. The squad froze for an instant, the training kicking in automatically. Contact. Ambush, 10 o'clock. Bear shouted, adrenaline sharp in his voice. Chaos erupted. Insurgents had taken advantage of the squad's descent, hiding behind boulders and behind the sparse scrub, firing from multiple angles. The squad returned fire carefully, taking cover behind the natural formations. Every second mattered, every decision carried weight, and Lucas felt the familiar surge of focus sharpen his senses. Bear stumbled as a ricochet struck near his leg. Lucas lunged forward instinctively, grabbing the sergeant's arm. "I've got you," he shouted over the roar of gunfire. The squad adjusted positions, moving in synchrony despite the intensity of the attack. Lucas scanned the valley through the scope, calculating every movement of insurgents, measuring wind, distance, and bullet drop. He fired with deliberate precision, taking out insurgents who threatened to flank the squad. Every shot counted. Every miss could cost lives. The rookie was no longer a mere participant. He was the anchor, the one who held the line. The ambush intensified. Bullets tore through the sparse shrubs, ricocheting off rocks and kicking up clouds of dust. Lucas crouched behind a jagged boulder, breathing slowly, steadying his heart as he adjusted his scope for the next shot. He could see the glint of a rifle in the distance, aimed directly at his squad. Calculating wind, angle, and distance, he fired. The insurgents slumped silently, and the valley fell momentarily quiet. His fellow soldiers glanced at him, eyes wide. Rookies killing it. Someone muttered under their breath, a mix of relief and awe. Lucas allowed no reaction. Focus was survival. Bear, now steadied by Lucas's support, barked instructions, coordinating flanking maneuvers to break the ambush. Lucas adjusted positions, guiding the squad with calm authority, spotting enemies, marking locations, and neutralizing threats with surgical precision. Every decision was deliberate, every movement calculated. The valley had become a chessboard of life and death, and Lucas was the player who moved with clarity, patience, and an unerring sense of timing. The squad followed his lead, inspired by the rookie who had become the guiding hand amidst chaos. Minutes felt like hours. The ambush continued, but the squad pressed forward, exploiting the openings Lucas created. One insurgent attempted to flank from the left ridge. Lucas anticipated the movement, firing a single round that struck true, neutralizing the threat before it could reach the squad. "Damn," muttered Rios, watching in disbelief. Even the veteran soldiers could not deny the rookie's prowess. Yet Lucas remained stoic, fully aware that each kill was a reminder of the lethal responsibility he carried. Victory was necessary, but it came at a price, one that weighed heavily in the silence between bursts of gunfire. As the ambush subsided, the squad regrouped, counting personnel, assessing injuries, and surveying the aftermath. Several insurgents had been neutralized, while the squad sustained minor scrapes and bruises. Lucas checked on Bear, ensuring the sergeant was unharmed. The young sniper's hands were steady, though sweat and grime coated his uniform. He felt the familiar thrill of survival, the intensity of focus, and the quiet acknowledgement that he had once again made the difference between life and death. The rookie had become indispensable, and the squad knew it. Bear clapped a hand on Lucas's shoulder. "You kept your head when it mattered most," he said, his voice low but proud. "That's the difference between a good shooter and a real sniper. You didn't just hit targets, you guided us through hell." Lucas nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and solemnity. The reality of war was not just in the shots fired, but in the lives preserved, the split-second decisions that defined survival. Today, the rookie had proven himself not by legend, but by action. The squad remained vigilant as they moved to secure the remaining insurgent positions. Lucas scanned relentlessly, the valley etched into his mind. Every ridge, rock, and shrub became a point of calculation, every shadow a potential threat. He felt a quiet confidence, tempered by the weight of responsibility. Leadership was not a title. It was action, presence, and precision under pressure. Today, Lucas Kane had stepped fully into that role. The impossible shot had become the catalyst for his transformation, and the ambush in the valley had solidified it. As the sun began to dip behind the rugged peaks, the squad secured the valley, marking the conclusion of a mission that had tested skill, courage, and leadership. Lucas Kane, once the rookie, now stood as a sentinel above the valley, surveying the terrain with eyes that had grown sharper, more calculated, and aware of the weight of life and death. The ambush had been a crucible, and he had emerged forged in its fire. The valley, scarred but silent, bore witness to a sniper who had become more than legend. He had become a leader, a protector, and a soldier defined by precision and courage. The valley had fallen into a tense quiet. Smoke rose from scorched earth where insurgents had fallen, mingling with the dust that never truly settled. The squad regrouped, tending to minor injuries, checking weapons, and scanning for any lingering threats. Yet despite the outward calm, the air was thick with tension. The ambush had tested every soldier, and while they had survived, the close brush with death left their nerves raw. Lucas Kane moved among them with quiet authority, his eyes sharp, scanning, calculating. He no longer felt like a rookie. The impossible shot, and now surviving the ambush, had transformed him into a linchpin of the squad. A low groan drew Lucas's attention. One of the younger soldiers, Private Daniels, had taken a graze from a ricocheted round in his shoulder. Blood stained the uniform, but the injury was not life-threatening. Lucas moved quickly, kneeling beside him. "Hold still," he instructed, his hand steady as he applied pressure to the wound. He tore a strip of cloth from his uniform, wrapping it tightly to stop the bleeding. Daniels winced, but looked up at him with wide, grateful eyes. "Thanks, Kane," he said. Lucas offered a faint nod, refusing to allow words of praise to distract him. Every soldier mattered. Every life was a responsibility, and he intended to honor that responsibility fully. Bear moved to check the perimeter, returning his gaze periodically to Lucas. "You've got a knack for this," Bear remarked quietly, almost as if speaking to himself. "Not just shooting. Handling the squad, keeping everyone focused under pressure." Lucas shrugged slightly, though inside he felt the stirrings of pride. Leadership was not about recognition. It was about action, and today he had been tested in ways beyond marksmanship. The ambush had forced him to think beyond the crosshairs, to calculate not just trajectories, but survival strategies for everyone around him. The squad moved carefully through the valley, searching for any remaining threats. Lucas led the way, eyes constantly scanning ridges, rocks, and shrubs. Every shadow, every glint of movement was noted, assessed, and catalogued. He guided the squad through terrain that had moments before been a deadly ambush site, ensuring that each step minimized exposure while maintaining progress. The weight of leadership was tangible now, and Lucas felt it in his shoulders and in the tightness of his jaw. He understood that decisions made in seconds could alter lives forever. As they advanced, they found evidence of insurgent retreat, abandoned equipment, makeshift caches, and footprints leading toward distant ridges. Lucas paused, kneeling to examine a trail. "They're moving northeast, probably regrouping," he noted, pointing to the disturbed soil and scattered footprints. Bear nodded, appreciating the insight. "Good eyes, Kane. That could save us another encounter down the line." Lucas felt a quiet satisfaction, not for recognition, but for the knowledge that his observations could prevent further casualties. Suddenly, another soldier called out, signaling movement on a far ridge. Lucas raised his scope, tracking the silhouette of a lone insurgent attempting to flank the squad. He calculated distance, wind, and trajectory, his mind moving in rapid, precise increments. One shot, measured, deliberate, and the threat was neutralized. The squad exhaled collectively, a wave of tension releasing into the air. Lucas didn't allow himself relief yet. There were always contingencies, always calculations, always another variable to consider. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the valley, the squad began setting up a temporary defensive perimeter. Lucas supervised placement, ensuring all angles were covered and that vulnerable points were fortified. His transformation was evident. The rookie who had once followed orders now guided them, combining tactical awareness with protective instincts. Every decision carried weight, and Lucas carried that weight with quiet, unwavering focus. His earlier fame seemed distant now, replaced by responsibility and action. Night fell, and the squad prepared for rest, yet sleep came cautiously, interrupted by the desert wind and the ever-present awareness of potential danger. Lucas kept watch for hours, scanning the ridges and monitoring any movement. The adrenaline from earlier engagements had not fully faded, sharpening his senses even as fatigue pressed against him. Bear observed quietly from his position, recognizing that Lucas had evolved. The rookie had become a sentinel, not just a marksman, but a guardian for every man under his care. A sudden rustle in the distance drew Lucas's attention. A pair of insurgents attempted to retrieve abandoned weaponry, unaware of the squad's observation post. Lucas whispered commands, coordinating a silent interception with precision. The insurgents were caught, disarmed, and detained without direct firefight. The squad's survival depended not just on bullets, but on observation, strategy, and restraint skills Lucas had honed under fire and in pressure. His ability to make calm, decisive judgments had become the defining feature of his leadership. As dawn approached, the squad prepared to exfiltrate from the valley. Lucas performed a final sweep, ensuring no threats remained. He noticed the subtle signs of retreat, disturbed soil, displaced rocks, and minor footprints leading toward distant terrain. Each detail was crucial. A misstep could leave them vulnerable to ambush. Lucas relayed the information to Bear, who nodded with approval. "You've got a sharp eye, Kane. That's the difference between survival and disaster." Lucas allowed himself a small nod, internalizing the compliment as both validation and motivation. Exiting the valley, the squad paused briefly on a ridge to survey the terrain one last time. The destruction from the ambush and counterattack was evident, but so was the effectiveness of their teamwork. Lucas reflected on the past days, the legendary shot, the ambush, and the moments where split-second decisions had defined life and death. He realized that leadership wasn't about accolades or recognition. It was about action, vigilance, and responsibility. He had stepped fully into that role, and the squad now trusted him implicitly. Bear clapped Lucas on the shoulder as they descended from the ridge. "You've come a long way, rookie," he said with a rare smile. Lucas gave a faint smile in return, feeling the weight of the moment. The impossible shot had made him a legend, but the ambush and leadership under fire had defined him. He was no longer simply a marksman. He was a sniper, a protector, and a leader. His journey from rookie to warrior had reached a new level, and the valley would remember him, not just for the shot, but for the calm, calculated hand that guided the squad through hell. As the squad returned to the outpost, Lucas felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. He had survived, he had protected his men, and he had grown into a role he had never anticipated. The desert wind swept across the valley, carrying with it the dust and memories of battle. Lucas Kane had stepped into legend with a single impossible shot, and he had solidified his place as a true leader through the trials that followed. The journey was far from over, but for now, he knew he had proven himself, not just to the squad or command, but to himself. The sun had just begun its slow rise over the jagged peaks, casting golden light across the outpost. Lucas Kane sat on the ridge, the Barrett MRA-D resting across his lap, its cold metal familiar and comforting. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of impossible shots, ambushes, and responsibilities that had transformed him from a nervous rookie into a sniper the entire battalion now relied upon. The memory of the 4,200-meter shot still haunted him, not as a moment of glory, but as the defining point of his transformation. Command had arrived for a debriefing early that morning. Lucas and the squad stood in formation as officers reviewed the events of the mission, the ambush, and the aftermath. Lucas listened quietly, absorbing praise that felt simultaneously hollow and deserved. Reports hailed his shot as historic, the longest confirmed sniper kill in operational history. Footage from drones had been analyzed, simulations created, and discussions held at multiple levels of command. Yet Lucas did not feel the thrill others expected. He felt the weight of responsibility, the quiet reminder of lives altered by a single pull of the trigger. Bear stood beside him, arms crossed, his eyes scanning both the officers and the surrounding terrain. "They'll write books about this," Bear muttered under his breath. Lucas allowed himself a faint, wry smile. "And probably put me in the headlines," he replied quietly. Bear shook his head. "Don't let it change you. The Valley doesn't care about fame. It only responds to skill, patience, and judgment. That's what keeps you alive." Lucas nodded, understanding that the lesson extended far beyond recognition. Legacy, he realized, wasn't about accolades. It was about precision, responsibility, and the quiet impact of actions taken when it mattered most. After the briefing, Lucas wandered back toward the ridge, away from the bustle of the outpost. The desert stretched endlessly before him, each ridge and rock etched into his memory. He recalled the moment of the shot, the wind, the distance, the slow exhale before the trigger squeezed, the explosion, the stunned silence, the chaos that followed. That single action had transformed him, marked him. But more than the act itself, it was the understanding that every shot had consequences, the lives it saved and the lives it ended. That shaped him into something more than a soldier, a sentinel. The squad gathered later in the day, sharing a quiet meal and reflecting on the recent missions. Conversations were subdued, tinged with awe and relief. Corporal Rios spoke hesitantly. "Kane, we all knew you had skill, but today you saved us. You led us through hell." Lucas shook his head slightly, uncomfortable with the adulation. "I didn't do it alone," he said. "We all did this. Every one of you made it possible." Yet he understood, even as he spoke, that the shot had changed perception. To the squad in command, he had become a symbol, a rookie who had achieved the impossible. Symbols, however, came with expectations heavier than any rifle. Night fell over the outpost, stars piercing the velvet darkness. Lucas remained awake, rifle across his knees, watching the ridges in the distance. The desert night was alive with subtle movement, the whisper of wind, the distant calls of nocturnal animals, and the ever-present awareness of potential danger. He reflected on the journey from that first impossible shot to the ambush and the leadership moments that followed. Each experience had reinforced one undeniable truth: skill alone did not define a sniper. Patience, judgment, and responsibility did. Without them, even the most extraordinary shot could become meaningless. Bear joined him quietly, sitting down on the rock beside him. "You've grown," Bear said simply, voice carrying a rare note of admiration. Lucas nodded, still gazing at the horizon. "It feels surreal," he admitted. "One moment, I'm just trying not to screw up. Next, everyone's talking about me like I'm some kind of legend." Bear chuckled softly. "Legends are born of extraordinary deeds, Kane. But remember this, the desert doesn't care about legends. It only cares about who survives, who makes the right call, who keeps their head when it matters." Lucas absorbed the words, feeling the weight of experience settling into his mind like a foundation knot in the days that followed. The story of Lucas Kane's shot spread throughout the battalion and beyond. Briefings referenced it. Younger soldiers spoke of it in quiet awe, and simulations were built around the physics and precision required to achieve it. Lucas, however, remained grounded, avoiding fanfare, focusing on training, observation, and preparation for the next mission. Fame, he realized, was fleeting. The lessons learned, the skills honed, and the responsibility carried, that was enduring. His legacy, he understood, would not be written in headlines alone, but in the quiet, meticulous preparation that saved lives again and again. One afternoon, Lucas was approached by a newly assigned rookie, eyes wide with curiosity. "Sir, I heard about the shot. 4,200 meters?" Lucas gave a faint nod, seeing in the young soldier a reflection of his own early days. "It's possible," he said, But it's also about preparation, patience, and responsibility. You don't just fire a shot. You live with it, and you understand what it means. The rookie nodded earnestly, absorbing the words like a sponge. Lucas realized in that moment that the true measure of his legacy might not be the distance of the shot, but the lessons he passed on, the discipline instilled, and the responsibility taught. Months later, as the squad rotated out of the valley and returned to a base with more resources and relative safety, Lucas sat on the same ridge where he had taken the impossible shot. The rifle rested across his knees, polished and ready, but he didn't feel the rush of adrenaline he had felt before. Instead, it was calm, reflection, awareness. He had become more than a marksman. He had become a sniper, defined by precision, judgment, and responsibility. And perhaps most importantly, he had become a leader. He thought about the insurgents, the lives lost and saved, and the delicate balance that defined warfare. Each moment in the valley had etched itself permanently into his memory. Lucas understood now that heroism was not about glory or recognition. It was about action, discipline, and the quiet knowledge that one had done everything possible to protect those in their charge. The impossible shot was history, yes, but it was also a reminder: skill without conscience was meaningless. And greatness was measured not by distance, but by responsibility. As the desert wind whispered across the ridge, Lucas allowed himself a rare, deep breath. He looked at the distant peaks, a valley that had tested him, and the horizon that promised new challenges. The legend of the 4,200-meter shot would endure, told in barracks, training rooms, and briefings for years to come. But Lucas Kane understood that his true legacy was more than a single bullet. It was the vigilance, discipline, and courage carried in every decision, every calculated shot, and every life he had the honor to protect. The sun climbed higher, casting light over the rugged terrain, illuminating both the beauty and danger of the world he had chosen. Lucas Kane stood, adjusted his rifle, and led his squad down from the ridge. The valley, scarred and quiet, bore witness to the journey of a rookie-turned-sniper, a boy who had dared the impossible and lived to carry the burden with skill, judgment, and humility. The impossible shot would be remembered, but more importantly, the man behind it, the soldier, the protector, the leader, would define the legacy forever.